The Farm Mudgegonga, Episode 4. It's at the end of the day, and I've caught up with Judy to talk about the broader farm, like soil health, nature, and the tough late autumn break. Good evening, Judy. It's 5 o'clock in the day.
Oh, what a day it's been, Darren. Thank you, and good evening.
Massive day today. How many acres are we on here?
So I'm farming at the moment 350 acres, so what you'd call a small farm. Certainly in terms of where my husband grew up at Borey Creek, it'd be a very small farm, but in terms of Mudgegonga, yeah, just a reasonable farm for one family, yeah.
And what are we running here?
So I've got 150 Pole Hereford cow breeders, and they're my main farm income. And then of course I have all the assorted other creatures, small, big, underground, overground, in the water, out of the water, that are the residents of the farm as well.
But the Pole Herefords, do you focus on a line or do you just allow randoms to come in?
Oh no, definitely no randoms on our farm. I shouldn't say that. We're all random a bit, aren't we? But the Pole Hereford cows come from many generations of breeding, selective breeding over a long period of time, because my dad had Pole Herefords. So we've been breeding them now, for over 50 years. My herd's mainly a closed herd. I buy the bulls in, so that's how I bring the genetics in. Occasionally I'll buy a cow or a couple of cows, but only very special ones when I'm trying to improve the genetics of the herd in a particular way. So mostly I keep my own females, and these cows live out their lives here from birth till they go at the end of their lives.
I have a passion for soil health, and you seem to love the organic way too.
Look, it's been a wonderful thing to change my thinking over many years. That I've been farming now for 40 years since I first came home, and I really couldn't have imagined that I could have embraced the whole no chemical soil health mantra more than I have now, because it's just everything. And I realise that I'm not farming cattle, I'm actually farming soil. That's the whole crux of what I do. Farming is entirely dependent on your soil health, and so that's where you've got to start.
So would you say, Judy, you're working with nature rather than against it?
Well, I think that is the big mindset change that I've been through, and I'd like to have thought of always working with nature, but certainly it's a very different way of thinking to what I grew up with, which was different, or farming was different for a whole lot of reasons. And again, there's only times when you have the luxury of being able to put a lot back in, because if you're going through a drought or recovering from a bushfire, or you've had a flood, just survival is everything, and you don't have a lot of spare investment to put back into things that you'd like to do. But at other times when you've had a good year, or you've had some off-farm income or whatever it might be, and you can put that back in, there's a great joy in being able to add to what nature does. For example, planting trees and doing a lot of work on your soil health, and restoring your water flows and putting in swales to keep the water in your paddocks, and use filtration, and to work on your dams and to fence them off, and all the things you can do that you want to do, but it's endless, and so you've also got to know these things cost. So it's a constant balancing act between what you want to do and what you can do and what you have the capacity to do. But the one thing I will say about farming, and certainly at my age, which is nearly 60, is that you're always learning. And if you've got an open mind, you don't think you know it all, and you're prepared to go and learn new things, I think you get a lot more joy.
Sometimes we need to make mistakes too, don't we?
Well, we have all made many mistakes. Every farmer's made mistakes. I think everyone's made mistakes in life. You make your mistake, you realise it's a mistake, and you do what you can to remediate it. And whether that be one of the things we're doing at the moment is re-fencing a lot of the farm on different contours, and putting the fences in different places. So it used to be nice to have straight fences and square paddocks that all lined up beautifully, but now they're a bit higgledy-piggledy, because they're actually being fenced where the watercourses go, and we're putting like with like, so that we can farm the soils in the same way. So if we have all the soil that is a particular type of soil in the one area that can be treated the same way, that's going to be more productive. So there's lots of things we can do. So it might not look pretty, but hopefully it's more functional and better for the environment.
The works I've seen recently, it's making sense. You can see it with your own eye, this different soil class with that new corridor that we're building at the moment. So I've been involved in lots of fencing, and in particular for corridors, which I love, because you're going to connect one mountain range to the other. And that has so many more benefits for windbreaks, cleaner water into the dams. One thing I'm really excited to down there is the hardened access point. Can you tell me about the benefits there?
Yeah, well, all this fencing project we're doing at the moment and re-treeing, and again we're planting thousands of trees every year, it builds on work we've done before, but also on what's worked and what hasn't. So a couple of things in what you've just said. The tree corridors are interesting. We started doing them 35 years ago as part of an agroforestry project. It was supposed to be, cutting edge, best practice, plant all these blue gums in there, 5 across, 10 across. We were supposed to harvest some of them and then leave some behind. Well, we actually found those blue gums were not terribly suitable for our farm, and most of them have self-destructed. They're very dry, they don't have great root masses, and there's very few of them left even after 35 years. So learning what trees to plant. So part of that has been propagating our own trees, working through the local land care groups, working through local nurseries where we are actually planting seeds and seedlings that have come from trees that we know are going to survive our particular circumstances and our particular environment. So we've had a lot more success with that. And instead of planting, rows of monoculture, planting all sorts of different trees. So it accommodates more nature, more wildlife, more pollination. They protect the trees by having understory, mid-story and tall trees, but it doesn't look perhaps as pretty as a row of exactly the same trees, all the same size, but it's certainly better for the trees, it's better for the environment and better for the wildlife, because you're encouraging these wildlife corridors, particularly where they're joined up to each other, so they're not going through open spaces where their predators can get them. They have to find the water. Like I said before, we're surrounded by bush, we're surrounded by forest, we have thousands and thousands of native wildlife and feral wildlife every day on our farm. You can't beat them, join them, you really have to provide for them, or they will find their own way through your paddock, through your dam wall, through your fences. So learning that if you fence them off, give them an idea where you'd like them to come through the fence to go and find their water and find their feed, and then give them that corridor that doesn't get in your way of your farming activity. So part of that is joining up these tree plantations. I'm looking out at them now as I speak, and there's so many different trials on the farm. I've been years and years of trialling different. Should they be in little forests, little triangular corners? Should they be in 5 wide, 10 wide, or not any wide? All different sorts. And should you plant them in rows? Should you plant them just randomly? And as we learnt this year when you and I were watering last year's trees, randomly doesn't make for getting the water cart through, but so rows sometimes have a benefit. And we're about to do a major project down the creek with our regen project, fencing off the creek, and there'll be some thousands of trees there that it'll be really interesting to see how they manage both not being eaten by the native wildlife and growing in hopefully a more protected environment. So you learn as you go along, and I think it is that working with nature. I know people who think you can just get rid of all the feral animals. Well, good luck to you. I think if you saw how many kangaroos are out and wombats are out in my paddocks every night, you'd realise that you've got to learn to live with them. It wouldn't matter how long you tried to get rid of them, it would never happen.
Fencing off a little bit and losing a little bit of productive land far outweighs the benefits.
It's an interesting thing. People say, oh, you plant so many trees, and even my mother will say to me, oh, but you must have less cows now you've fenced off all these plantations. But in fact, planting trees can actually add to your productivity. It can add to your soil structure. It can provide shade and make your soil more productive. These paddocks with no trees that just bake in the open sun, and the soil structure decays, and in summer nothing grows. So you've actually, at times, you're protecting your soil by putting these fence lines in. It has a lot of benefits in many ways, and even the agronomists will tell you that trees can actually add to your productivity. So yes, you give away a little bit of land, but perhaps you increase your productivity, and it one counters the other, but you also get the benefit of your beautiful trees, better oxygen, providing a space for wildlife, birds, bees, all the pollination that happens through those micro insects and micro birds and bees. So, there's so many benefits. I think giving away a little bit of land's a pretty small price to pay.
For so long you didn't ask for help, and you and Tim did it all on your own.
Well, yes, I think most farmers do it on their own. I don't like asking for help even now, but I know the project I've got underway at the moment is too big for me. I think a lot of us become farmers because we like our own company, and there's nothing I love more than literally getting up and going out the paddock and not having to think about what's happening at home and just doing what needs to be done. So that is no pain for me. That's my joy. But of course, if you've got more people involved, you are more productive, and a lot of the work we're doing at the moment is way beyond what I could be doing, and some of the machinery you hear in the background, being able to access an excavator and a posi track and the best of all the equipment being the steel post automated putter-innerer, which you manage very well over your head with having to get the star pickets in. I'll be very glad to not have to use a sledgehammer ever again in my life. So there's a lot of ways we can benefit by, occasionally actually having people that have really good equipment, are very strong and very good at what they do, come in and help. It's a balance. You asked about the dams, which I think is an interesting one. I am progressively trying to fence off my dams because I know that the cattle do, really make the water quality deteriorate, and they're not good for the dams. They pog it all up, and they also get worms from the dam banks, and they do, it'd be much nicer if they could have cleaner water coming from the dam systems, particularly in our farm where it's spring water feeding into the dams. So we're going through this program, not just fencing off the dams, but planting habitat around the dams to encourage a diversity of life in the dams, whether that be, water insects or ducks and birds. And in fact, we have a swan that's turned up, which is rather beautiful, and hopefully there'll be a few more of those, and all the things that live among waterways. But we're also playing with ideas as to how you then water the animals. I've got a lot of cattle to water, so one trough's not going to cut it, so do you have 2 troughs or 10 troughs, or do you have a big circular trough, or how do you actually get the water for the animals on a hot day? And we're trialling this hard access points into the dams, which I think will be very interesting. So just having one section of the dam that the cattle can drink out of, so that it is, in a sense, an endless supply of water, but they can't actually access and damage the trees and the habitat around the dam, and they don't actually stand in the dam and
so they just go in there for a quick drink and then they move on if you haven't got
hopefully it's a quick drink, or they can have a slightly slower one if they're very thirsty, but hopefully they have their drink. They don't stand around talking in the dam as they often do. They don't do a lot of damage to the environment, but they've still got access to plentiful water. So this is our new project. We've got some troughs, we've got some hard access points, and we'll just see how that goes. As I said, you're always learning.
I love the concept. This morning you had probably 2 hours out feeding cattle again. It's taking a lot of your time right now.
Well, I think normally this time of year we're only just starting to feed, so we're talking to you at the end of May, and normally by now I'm thinking, oh yes, well we're feeding, and feeding becomes quite a big thing. I've been feeding now, every second day, every third day since the start of February, because it's been a very, very dry year, and that can get a bit wearing, although I say that only that it gets a bit wearing on the body. It never gets wearing on the mind, because one of the great things about feeding cows is you get to see all your cows. So you feed, they all come up, you can walk around them. It's how you get them quiet. You get to see, which ones are fat, which ones are thin, who's done what, whether someone's got a wart on their face or a pink eye or a sore foot, whatever it might be. And it's a really important part that you get to see all the cows. So I always enjoy the feeding time of year. My shoulders less so, but this year it'll be quite a long haul by the time we get through to end of August, which is still a few months away.
How long since you've seen such a dry autumn?
This is a shocking autumn, and I'm, after a couple of very good years, you can't complain, but I think it was shocking because I wasn't expecting it. They said it would be a hot summer. It wasn't a terribly hot summer. We thought we'd sort of got through it. I don't think we really expected that we would get no rain, basically no usable rain in autumn. And even now, it'll be June before we get any rain. So it's as tough as I've seen for probably 2004, so 20 years. And it came out of the blue, to be honest. So, but that's, that is farming. And there's also a cycle in farming, I think, where, sometimes you need dry spells and you need wet spells. That's how nature sort of re-energises itself. The dams had all filled up, the springs had all filled up for a couple of wet years. The weeds had gone a bit silly. And there are a lot of things that happen in wet years where you think, we should stop raining, which you don't say very often, but occasionally you do wish it would stop raining, just for a day or two. Whereas now we have this dry spell. I think it'll be very interesting to see how the ground copes with when the rain does come, whether in fact the weed burden might be less, might be more, hard to tell. But we've been able to do a lot of work on the farm in the dry that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So you can always turn it into a bit of a positive so long as the rain eventually comes.
You've got a special blend that you've just seeded?
Well, we've changed again the way we farm, the way we grow pasture here. It used to always be, we cut hay and we'd grow the rye and clover paddocks, which all grow so well. But over time you realise that different paddocks need different things, different soil needs different things. So doing a lot of soil testing, getting good advice, and then planting what the agronomist tells me that paddock actually needs to make all the minerals and nutrients in that paddock, optimised for growing pasture. So some of that has been growing multi-species pastures, so sometimes 10 to 15 different seeds in the one paddock, which come at different times of the year, so there's always some ground cover, keeping that ground cover there. And they'll also have different root depths. So some will penetrate quite deep, some will be quite short, some will cut through other root masses, and they all have, leave their benefit of, or adjust the minerals and nutrients in the soil. They say there's really not anything such as a weed, that weeds are only a sign of something else, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. You can see a lot from what your soil grows as to what your soil needs as well. So trying to, in a sense, get rid of the unwanted things by planting the wanted things in a way that they're going to grow. And since I've stopped killing pasture, which sounds a terrible thing to say, but of course that's part of farming. You go to sow a paddock and you'd spray it out and you'd sort of start from scratch, so you get this beautiful clean pasture. But since I found other ways of sowing, I've actually got a lot more joy out of that pasture work too, because it's not that cycle of kill, grow, kill, grow, kill, grow, and the residue of the chemical that you will be there for longer than I will be. So I said, I'm not a fully organic farmer, but I only use chemical where absolutely necessary. And sometimes that you might find a perimeter of the fence that has blackberry that is too much to pull out by hand, and you may need to use a chemical at times. I'm still at that point, but in the paddocks themselves, no chemical.
You always get excited when I bring you back a bunch of purple flowers.
Yes, well, we do an awful lot of hand work here. We do hoeing of Patterson's curse and digging of blackberry, and for many, many years we've hand pulled those odd weeds that come in from an errant bird or somehow on a tyre or whatever, however they get to find themselves in the middle of your paddock. So I always have a shovel in the back of the little mule, as I call it, my little motorised mule, ready to chip out something that shouldn't be there.
That was the number one rule you told me, is never drive past the purple flower. Never
drive past something that you're going to try to find when you come back, because you won't find it, Darren. That's the thing. You'll say, oh, I know there was a piece of Patterson's curse in this corner, but if you don't get it when you see it, it won't be there when you go looking for it. So there's a lot you can do by hand, and I think the paddocks they look amazing compared to where we were 20 years ago.
Well, thanks again for your time with this podcast, Judy. I've had a big day in the creek today, fencing, so I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you, Darren. Another big day awaits us. Thanks very much for all you do for me too, and for doing these podcasts.
Thank you.
Mudgegonga.